Welcome to the StockOptionAssassin.com's weekly video for swing trading options. Today is Friday, June 8th, 2012, and the market just closed. Taking a look at the SPY, had a pretty big up week this week, supposedly one of the biggest weeks of the year. Index is up over 2%. You kind of look at the chart here. I've got some lines drawn in here, and we'll kind of go over those. You can see we had this, kind of high, lower, low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, and we actually are coming closer to making a new high. And this starting to look like we're positioned to sort of pop up and potentially make a new high. We'll have to see if that actually happens. You can see yesterday's dramatic gap up, and then we kind of reversed right back into Wednesday's close, forming kind of a meeting line candlestick pattern. That did not confirm to the downside today. We did have a move to the upside, but until we make a higher high, you still have to be bearish on this market. I'm currently going into the weekend net short. Pretty light positions though, but what I would be looking to do is I'm actually still looking for shorts. I think if we can get up to this next area on the SPY, first of all, we need to get past 134. That's about 1340 on the index. But if we can get up to 136, I would probably look to add some shorts, and then at least get a kind of pullback. What I'm kind of looking for potentially is maybe we get a little follow through on Monday, Tuesday, and then you kind of get like this 3-bar surge, and maybe look to add some shorts on Wednesday or Thursday. But obviously have to see how that comes out. I think there's going to be a lot of news released over the weekends that are really going to drive the markets. Two things. First, Chinese data is going to be coming out earlier this week. I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday. The Chinese cut their lending rate by 1/4 point. This sent the market jumping that China is boosting their growth. The downside to that is, well, why are they doing that? And the easy answer is that their economy is slowing down, so they're trying to do something to boost it. So that's all fine and dandy. This weekend, we should find out how bad the economy is. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe we get a boost further into the, further into next week. The other, obvious news issues coming out this weekend is going to be coming out of Europe about Spain and how much money their banks are going to need. This week on Tuesday, the G7 had a kind of an emergency conference call, and really nothing came out of that. But basically, there's a lot of news coming out this weekend, and this market has not made a new high, a higher high. So really, next week's going to be critical in where this thing's going to be headed. I'm still in kind of a short to rally mode, but if we do kind of break out and then we start finding some support around this area, this 134, let me bring in some moving averages real quick. On here, I have the 13, 20, and 50, and 200-day moving averages. They're all simple except the 13's and EMA. You can start to see the 13 is starting to curl up and potentially might cross over the 20. But again, you can see where that resistance line is around 130, 136 is going to be right where the 50-day moving average is. So I think that's going to be your next resistance point if we can break through this 134 area. So you also have on the squeeze indicator a little bit of positive divergence here, and this is similar to a lot of charts where you had a low and then a lower low, but the indicator made a low and a higher low. So a little bit of a positive divergence here, which gave a little bit of this bounce away. We did take some scalps in our market timing service this week. We scalped USO for about a 20% gain, but we are also having some short positions as well. So if we do start to break out, I want to give you guys some long trades to look at. And what I'm going to be covering here, I'm just going to go through real time. These are stocks that are in a squeeze. I'm using the squeeze indicator. Squeeze means that the Bollinger Bands are trading inside the Keltner channels. And so let's look at a few of them here. Akamai, positive momentum, still closed right at the 200-day moving average. We're in the first day of a squeeze. What I would look, if this positive momentum can kind of cross over, you start to see some light blue bars. Maybe you get up to the 50 and a pullback, and then maybe this thing can break out if the market can keep it together. Cisco, similar chart, second day in a squeeze. seemed to kind of be forming a base here. Got above the base moving averages here. You still have the 50 coming down through the 200 here, which is not bullish, but you also have a gap window here. So if this thing, Cisco, can get past 1720, I think you probably head up to gap fill, which is about 1850. That would coincide with the 200 and the 50-day moving averages. Let's look at FCX, first day in a squeeze, similar chart, positive momentum, a little bit of a base here, sort of a double bottom, got above some moving averages. I think there's a lot of resistance on this one. I would actually not want to play this one. You got the 50 if you can break through that, which you probably don't do that on first hit, but 35.50, you might be able to get back to the 200. I think this is more of a play. I mean, you'll know if China has very weak demand, then or weak economy data that comes out this weekend, you'll probably see FCX come back down here, but something to keep an eye on. Let's look at Nike. Holding up relatively well. Almost looks like a large, I mean, it's kind of a basing up here, is dipping down. You kind of got some resistance right at the 50. If this thing can clear up and you get a little positive momentum, I would look for a move to retest this high at around 110, maybe 111. If you get a pullback and the 50 holds, and this thing will break out to retest the 52-week high, which is about 114.81. PBR, Petrobras, not really interested in this right now. Just extremely bearish chart, made new lows. It is kind of forming a base here, but I think there's some better long plays out there. Pepsi was actually in Pepsi this week, had a decent trade. This thing's holding up pretty well. You can see we broke out above 67, which was kind of resistance for a while. Kind of this ascending triangle pattern. I always zoom out just a little bit, you can see where the resistance is. Came up to this pivot, chopped around, pulled back to the 50. I took a scalp here on the 50. I actually got out yesterday. Looks like I should have held it into Friday, but anyway, still made a decent trade on this scalp from the 50 to the moving averages. We did break above. I would expect a retest of 69. What you're seeing in the squeeze here is, you're in a 2-dot squeeze. This thing is coming down, but look what it did here. It pulled back. The moving average is held, and then you get a positive momentum, and that's when you want to strike. I think Pepsi's decent company. The moving averages are all kind of fanned the right way. You have the 200, the 50, the 20, the 13 is starting to curl up. So I think Pepsi is still good to the long side. Let's look at Starbucks here. Starbucks kind of looking bearish, but my personal experience, I've tried to short Starbucks and I've got my hand smacked a few times. So anyway, chart-wise, positive momentum. You're getting some waffling. You're in like a 5-day squeeze here. This thing starting the base. If this thing can kind of break out, I would look for a retest of the highs. But I don't think that's going to come anytime soon. I would, maybe late June, July, you could look for that. But right now we're kind of in a range between 56 and 51, so maybe you can play that range. SINA, SINA. I'm actually liking this to the long side. However, this has huge Chinese data risk. So if the economy is slowing, SINA is like the Google of China. If China data is relatively weak, you may see this drop. If you can get a retest of this 50 and even kind of this double bottom area right here, or triple bottom, if you want to call it, around 47, I think that's going to be your spot. So let's see what happens next week. No position in this right now, but definitely keeping this on the radar. If things do start to pick up and China does really start boosting their growth, SINA is going to come right back up to the 200. So probably going to take another week or two for that to develop. Silver, this is just a tough chart. I was actually kind of bearish on silver. You were kind of getting this large bear flag. You got this pop on potential Bernanke QE3 bounce, and then this sold off on weak data. So silver's kind of that play. You are getting some positive momentum here, but I'm just not liking this to the long side. The chart's just too not clean enough. Let's look at Verizon. I had been mentioned this to our members this week. This is what I was talking about with Pepsi. You got this downdraft, right? Not downdraft, but this down sloping, momentum in the squeeze. You formed some dots. Here was your signal that this thing was gonna, break higher. Pulled back. You got the moving averages the right way. You finally broke out today. So this thing will likely move higher if the market continues. I would look for a pullback to 42, and that's going to be your entry. Maybe you get that later next week. And let's look at Pepsi again just to compare that similar chart. Not quite as clean, but you're getting this kind of consolidation pattern. Kind of looking for that Pepsi to kind of curve around here like that. So we'll look at one more, eBay. eBay's got kind of a nice box formation, pretty close to 52-week highs. You're in a pretty big squeeze. You can see it kind of, you're really kind of in a range here. Depending on how Monday, Tuesday opens, if this thing can hold the 20 here around $40, that could be your entry and look for a breakout on eBay. So that's all I got in the charts for now. Again, kind of playing it light. I don't think the selling is over, as you probably saw on last week's post. Kind of looking for one leg lower, but maybe because it's option expiration, you might get a little bit of sideways to upside action next week, and then we'll see what happens from there. That's all I got for today. You guys have a great weekend, and I will talk to you later.